Hi there BookTube, it's Eleanor here, and today I come to you feeling a little bit ropey after my work night out. Luckily I didn't drink too much, but I do still feel a bit jaded, so I apologise if I'm not quite my usual bouncy self. But I wanted to get this up because this is my week 3 of my Snakes and Ladder reading TBR. Now this week's been a bit of a weird one, and I'm sure I will analyse this in my head over and over and probably come to no concrete conclusions, but I had more DNFs this week than I had reads. I read 3 books and I DNF'd 4. Now, whether those 4 would have been DNFs had I not been putting pressure on myself to read these books in a month, I'm not 100% sure, but I do feel like maybe they're just not the right books for me, so I'm not going to beat myself up too much about not wanting to carry on with them. I think I'll talk about the DNFs first. I'm not going to go into great detail because I think these are probably all quite good books, but just not books that were either right for me at the moment, or you know, it wasn't really the right time, or something about them just didn't click. The first one I'm really disappointed with because everyone thinks it's great, and that is Educated by Tara Westover. This one is the one that I'm most debating potentially picking up at a later date. I do have it on audio, so I will be getting rid of the book itself off my TBR, but I do have it on audio. I just couldn't, there's some audiobooks that I listen to, or books that I read, that I start to sort of zone out, and there is times sometimes where you start to sort of fall asleep. Not just because you're tired, but just sort of because almost like your brain doesn't want to read the book. I don't know. This one I just couldn't focus on the words and focus on what was going on. I just found it really difficult to get on with, which is probably not fair to the book itself, I think, because so many people love it, and I think on paper it should be one that I really love. So this is one I might come back to at a later stage on audio, but for now I'm DNFing it off my TBR. The next one, just the writing style and the voice for this didn't work for me, and I think that because of the type of book it is, the voice has to work, and that is Eggshell by Katrina Lally. This is one that I thought I was going to like. I thought it was going to give me Eleanor Oliphant sort of vibes, but yeah, the writing style for this just doesn't work for me, and I read about 50 pages and I knew that I wasn't going to want to carry on, so I'm DNFing this one. The next one is Secret Society Girl by Diana Pettifrand, and this one is okay. The writing style was okay. I didn't like the voice of the character. It felt a bit whiny, and I just get the impression that this is going to be sort of a skull and bones book, and I'm just not 100% sure that it's for me. It felt quite dated, and yeah, I kind of could tell after about 100 pages that it wasn't one that I was going to enjoy. I might like to read it at the time, but it wasn't going to be you know, a really 4 or 5 star book, so I decided to DNF this one. And the final DNF was really a disappointment, actually, because I loved this author's first book, Longbourn, which was telling the Pride and Prejudice story from below the stairs. But this one's called The Buzzy Lies by Jo Barker, and it's a complete change from that. It's a different type of story. It's about a woman, she's married and they have a baby, and at the beginning of the story she doesn't have a baby, but she's pregnant, and she is quite nastily sort of assaulted and attacked on her way home, and this sort of leads to some sort of PTSD symptoms, and she decides that she wants to go and teach about writing at a university, and she gets this job that's quite a way away from where they live. Her husband doesn't want to leave his job, so he decides he's going to stay on teaching his job and come and see her and their son at weekends. This is sort of a few years later now, so it's sort of 2-3 years later. And she moves into this place in the middle of nowhere to teach this course. But I just couldn't get on with it. It was so slow, and I just couldn't believe the motivations of the characters. I couldn't quite get on board with what was going on, and yeah, it wasn't giving me the feelings that I wanted. It wasn't leading anywhere fast, and and within that slow wasn't some sort of massive build up. I didn't feel this massive need to find out more. So unfortunately I DNF'd that one too. Okay, let's talk about the books I did read, and it's pretty obvious from reading two of these, or seeing two of these, the type of mood that I was in. But I'm going to start with the other one first, which is my first by this author, and that is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. So this is the story about a girl goes missing, and years later, you know, sort of 20 years later, events start to unravel another girl's disappearance. And the sister of the girl that disappeared starts to question things in her life and question what happened to her sister, and starts to delve more deeply into secrets within her own life. And it sort of all starts to unravel there, really. It was tense, it was suspenseful, there was a little bit of a twisty, turny sort of a journey, and from the start we feel like we know everything, or we kind of quite quickly believe we know the story, but there is some twists and turns in there as well, which I really enjoyed. I ended up reading this, I mean, it's not a short book, I think, yeah, it's nearly 500 pages, but I actually ended up reading this in one sitting. I just couldn't put it down, and I think partly that was because I needed to know the conclusion, because I felt quite unnerved, and I think I really enjoyed this, but I think I'm going to have to steer clear of thrillers for a little bit, because I find them quite unnerving and they make me a little bit on edge, and that's not a feeling that I necessarily want to take from books all the time. It's good at the time, but I'm not really one of those people that enjoys being scared. So I did really enjoy it, and I gave it 4 stars, and I will read more Karen Slaughter in the future, but I just might have to have a bit of a gap first. Okay, so the next book I picked up was a deviation from my TBR, but I just fancied it, and that was Dare by Ali Juliet Masseau. The front cover is quite revealing of what the book's about. I think it's a bit of a whoa front cover, but this is about a UFC fighter and a masseuse who's sort of a properly trained sort of masseuse in terms of rehabilitation from stays in hospital and also from sports. They, you know, with this, it's not the storyline that's going to hook you in, because we kind of know what's going to happen, but it's the tension and the sexual chemistry in the build up and the sexy times that's, you know, this is what you read in the book for, and that's what has to be good in there. And I really was good in this. It was really a good read. I really enjoyed it. There was some really heartwarming elements as well, and it was just a really fun ride. And I think, again, I read this one pretty much in one sitting, and it really got me hooked. So I gave this one 4 stars. And then the next one was in a similar vein, with a slightly less revealing front cover, but it was called Dirty Like Me by Jane Diamond. This was a bit of a random one. I'd read Dare, and I really just wanted something that was similar, so I looked up similar books. I found this one, I bought it, and I read it in a day as well. So this one is about a woman. She is visiting her best friend one day, who is a talent modelling agent, and as she comes in, she's a bit dishevelled. She's currently working as a barista. She's sort of an artist, but she's been going through a hard time since she broke up with her fiance, and so she's been working at her sister's coffee shop as a barista. So she goes to visit her best friend. It's raining, she's got a dog with her, she's a bit of a mess, and her friend is having a meeting with one of the world's sort of sexiest and most well-known rock stars, who she really has no idea who he is, and they meet, and he was in there trying to find a model for his latest music video. They ring later and ask if she can be their model for the music video, and so starts this sort of lovely slow burn romance between these two, and figuring out, you know, who they are, who they want to be, this sort of fake dating plot and how that sort of works. And it was just a real guilty pleasure, gobble you up, enjoy it book. You know, just one that I couldn't put down. It's like, when I say guilty pleasure, I don't mean that I'm ashamed of reading it. When I say guilty pleasure, I talk about it as if I had a big pack of chocolate buttons and I eat the whole bag. You know, this is one of those ones where you open the book and you know you're going to eat the whole bag in one sitting, because you can't stop. And yeah, this was really good, and I really enjoyed it as well, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. So there were some good ones this week. There was 3 4-star books, but there was 4 DNFs, which I'm okay with. Now I have got, I think, 6 books left on my TBR for the month, which might feel a bit daunting, but next week is the reading rush and 5 of those are on the reading rush for my TBR. I think I can do it. I finish school on Wednesday for the summer holidays, so I should have a little bit more time to read. So my aim is to complete this TBR for the month. It's not sustainable going forward. I will be taking into account obviously the stuff that you've all said about throwing 2 dice and maybe ending up with less books, which will be nice. But I've managed it, I think. Well, sorry. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Touching wood. You'll have to catch up with me after the reading rush and I'll let you know if I actually have made it and completed this TBR. But I'm really pleased with this sort of idea and the snakes and ladders concept. It's really worked for me in terms of picking my TBR and making it more fun, and also setting myself a TBR that I've really enjoyed picking up. So I'm definitely going to be continuing with it next month. But that's it from me, and those are the books I've read. Can you recommend me any more steamy books? Maybe ones that aren't, you know, all over the place on BookTube at the moment. There are some that I see quite regularly and I know about those. They are on my list. But if you've got one that's maybe under the radar or one that you don't think is read enough, then let me know, because I'm quite in the mood for a bit of that over the summer, and I've got a holiday coming up, so they're definitely ones that I like to read, you know, while I'm on the sun lounger. Anyway, that's it from me, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye for now, BookTube.